So everybody's heard of your Miranda rights, right? You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. We've all watched Cops and we've seen the rundown of the rights. But most people really don't understand the case of Miranda versus the state of Arizona. But we're going to talk about that and all of its intricacies in today's episode. I'm Joshua Roberts, attorney at law, and you are watching Lawyer Up. Today we continue with our epic SCOTUS series. We're talking about epic Supreme Court cases from our country's highest court. Today's episode is about Miranda versus the state of Arizona. We're going to talk about the parties, the facts of the case, the decision that was reached by the Supreme Court, its reasoning, and then, of course, why the case is epic. Now, if you enjoy the episode, I would ask you to smash that like button. If you got a question, you've got something to say, put it in the comment sections below. If you haven't, subscribe to the channel so we can get more information to you about the law and current events. And last but not least, if you got the time and you got friends who might like this channel, I'd ask you to share me on social media. So let's go back to the early 60s. We have a civil rights movement going on. There is concern in the United States over the overreaching of law enforcement. We have the case of Ernesto Miranda in the state of Arizona. What happened was Ernesto was arrested, questioned over several hours, and then ultimately confessed to a brutal rape and kidnapping. At his trial, his confession was admitted into evidence, and ultimately he was found guilty and sentenced to 20 to 30 years behind bars. Of importance is that he was never advised by the police that he had the right to remain silent. Now, Ernesto Miranda's lawyers appealed the case, and they took it up to the Supreme Court saying, hey, he has a Fifth Amendment right to be quiet, to remain silent. And he was not told about that right by law enforcement. And ultimately, the Supreme Court agreed in a close 5-4 decision that criminal defendants that are in custody have to be advised of their Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. In its decision, the Supreme Court said that Ernesto Miranda's statements could not be used against him because he had not been given his Miranda warnings, which that's what they would later be called, but essentially advised of his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. In doing so, the Supreme Court actually overruled the Arizona Supreme Court, and that state court had upheld the conviction of Miranda. The SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States, said, hey, law enforcement, here are the things that you have to advise a criminal defendant of. Number one, they have the right to remain silent. Number two, anything they say can be used against them as evidence in a court of law. Number three, they have the right to an attorney. And number four, if they cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed to them. And interestingly, they went on from there to say that even if a criminal defendant initially waives his right to remain silent or waives his right to an attorney, at any point during the questioning, that defendant can stop the questioning and say, hey, I want to remain silent or I want an attorney. And if they do so, questioning must immediately cease. And the net effect of this ruling is that any statements that are obtained in violation of your Fifth Amendment rights are not admissible against you in a court of law. Now, it's important to note that this only applies to what they call custodial interrogation. That's after you've been arrested. If you make voluntary statements before you're under arrest, then those can still be used against you at court. So if an officer is just walking up to you and you're like, there aren't any bodies in my trunk, there aren't any bodies in my trunk, that's a voluntary statement prior to you being under arrest, and that could be used against you. So the Supreme Court said Ernesto Miranda had to be retried. So the state of Arizona went back, they had another trial without using his confession against him, and he was still convicted and again sentenced to another 30 years. So he didn't get away with anything. However, the Miranda rights were established for all defendants throughout the United States. So that's the episode on Miranda versus the state of Arizona. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button. If you got something to say, put it in the comment sections below. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. And last but not least, I love it when you share me on social media. I hope you have enjoyed the episode, how we've talked about how the Miranda warnings and your Miranda rights were born. My name is Joshua Roberts, attorney at law, and you've been watching A Lawyer Up.
Send lawyers, guns, and money.